Hello, and welcome to a Sunny Book Nook. Today I'm going to be talking about books that remind me of other books. Basically, if you like one of the books, you should read the other book. So I'm presenting you with pairs of books that I think are kind of similar, and that if you enjoyed one, you'd likely enjoy the other. Because I enjoy watching these videos and reading these lists, because I always find good recommendations and good new suggestions for my TBR. A lot of these recs in front of me that I'm gonna show in this video are actually from recs and trying to figure out books that are similar to the books that I wanted to read. I wanted to make a guide like this for my channel. I'm going to start off with a classic. If you liked The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, which you probably do, because this is a huge booktube favorite, and everyone and their mother is obsessed with this trilogy. You should definitely check out Monstrous by Marjorie Liu. It also is an Asian fantasy that is deeply rooted in exploring the trauma of war, and we're following a female main character who has godlike abilities and connections to these powers that she's not really quite sure of yet. So I think that these two books would go along together well. If you liked this and you liked the creepy art and the gruesomeness of this book, I think you will also enjoy the gruesome and gritty dark nature of the Poppy War trilogy, because that is really foundational to the entire narrative, just how dark and tragic and brutal war is. And both of these stories are inspired by wars in China and historical context and references in a fantasy setting. So since both of these books are grim dark fantasy type vibes, I think you should read them both if you liked one or the other. The other recommendation I have here is that if you liked A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, you should check out The Black Tides of Heaven by Neon Yang. These books on the surface don't really seem that similar, because one of them is a almost portal fantasy where there are multiple universes, and the other is an Asian-inspired fantasy with religion and an empire at the central force of it. However, because these are both fantasies following a main character who is really headstrong and dynamic and set in these fantastical worlds, I think that what's most similar about these two, and that if you liked one you'd probably like the other, is the writing style. They both have this almost sort of removed yet engaging but not as descriptive sort of writing style that I think a lot of young adults and younger reading adult fantasy tends to read as such. The next recommendation duo I have on here is for In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This book has gotten so much hype across the book community, which makes a lot of sense because it is very good. It is a memoir detailing the domestic abuse and violence a queer woman faces in a lesbian relationship, and it's framed in almost a horror magical realism genre play, and we experience the horrors that Carmen Maria Machado underwent firsthand as the reader. And I think that if this book was really emotionally compelling for you, you should definitely check out Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars, because this book is also a magical memoir that incorporates elements of almost dark fairy tale into a memoir, into a narrative nonfiction sort of story. And we're following a trans girl in an Asian family who leaves home to go live and work as a trans sex worker on the streets, I believe, and forms a girl gang with other trans girls, and they protect themselves and fight men who are awful to them and their peers. And because it's also a magical memoir that almost reads like fiction, but is so heartbreaking that you know that it is a true narrative, I feel that if you liked one, you definitely like the other. And they're both stories about queer women and their relationships to themselves and the people around them in toxic environments, and how they get through that that and how they gain their strength and identity in themselves. The next book rec duo I have here is for The Vanishing Half and Passing by Nella Larson. I'm sure this has come across your mind or your feed at some point already, because I think The Vanishing Half pretty explicitly borrows from the concepts explored in Passing, in which in The Vanishing Half, which also got incredible amounts of well-deserved hype on BookTube and the Bookternet, I think that this Harlem Renaissance classic hasn't really gotten as much hype, and I think it really deserves it, and it's also really short. So this book follows two sisters who are separated when one of them decides to live her life passing as a white woman, and the other goes back to the all-black community they were raised in and tries to raise a dark-skinned daughter in a community that values light skin over everything else. And we're also following the kind of generational stories coming from these sisters and the children that they have and the relationships that they form. In this book, we're following these two women who kind of grew up together in a similar community but were estranged, and then one day they kind of just out of the blue run into each other, and they're both white passing black women, and one of the women, the woman that our main character runs into at this cafe, she is now married to this racist white dude and is living her life as a white woman and has been completely cut off from her community. And now that she has found our main character, she's trying to kind of get back in touch with her community. I think that the themes in here of colorism and racism and the setting of the historical early 20th century America, as well as the sort of family dynamics and relationships explored in both of these books, are definitely parallel to each other, and that if you enjoyed one, you should definitely check out the other. When I was reading The Vanishing Half, I was thinking about Passing a lot because I had read this months before this even came out, so I thought that a lot of the themes and a lot of the topics explored were just very fascinating to see how these different authors within different time periods kind of fleshed out these characters and conflicts differently. It was really interesting to me. The next set of books I have here, I couldn't exactly duo them off in a very specific way, but I think that this kind of cluster of books all remind me of each other, and if you liked one, you'll likely like the other. First, I have The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner, and this book is about these women at this women's prison facility, and we're getting the perspectives of some of the prison guards, the prison teacher, some of the women in the prison, and their lives leading up to and within this prison, and how their lives are like. And it's very gritty and dark and traumatic, and also almost humorous in a darkly humorous sort of way. Our author feels almost sarcastic in her exploration of the trauma and grief and suffering that a lot of these women are undergoing, while still being very genuine and tender to their narratives and their stories. And I think that is pretty similar to what our author does in Pizza Girl by Jean Kyung Fraser, because our main character here is an 18-year-old pregnant pizza girl who develops this really weird attached relationship to this random mom in her LA neighborhood that she delivers pizzas to. And this girl is also suffering a lot of trauma from the fact that her father died because of his alcoholism, and her mother is pretty removed from herself, and her boyfriend and the father of her unborn child is also a bit of a he's a nice guy, and but their relationship isn't perfect. But our main character is really just having a lot of struggles. She's also struggling with her own alcoholism. She's having a lot of mental health issues, and all of that is explored in the story. So I think that both of these stories kind of get along together because they're about these troubled young women and the sort of unfortunate backgrounds they were born into, and how the poverty and reality of toxic home environments and relationships and the mundanity of these things can be so pervasive and so impactful to your psyche. Okay, so editing Sunny here months after I filmed this video. So another thing that I am realizing now that I failed to talk about while filming was that both of these books and the books I'm about to discuss have a really strong sense of place. Pizza Girl as well as The Mars Dream are both set in like LA-ish. The sense of the location of that city and the energy of it is like really seeped into the writing. And for the other books I'm talking about, that is also true. So that's another similarity, I think, that is within all these gritty literary fiction novels that like center women. And along that, like, this chain of recommendations, I think that if you like Pizza Girl, you should definitely check out Eileen, because in Pizza Girl, I noticed a similarity in it, in that this main character develops a relationship with this other woman that is, like, almost homoerotic in how aggressive it is, and in Eileen, that also happened. And it also, I think that Eileen has something to do with... Eileen kind of reminds me of The Mars Room, because The Mars Room deals with prison, and Eileen in this book is a secretary at this boys detention center or like jail facility. So I found that very interesting, but the vibes are also very spot on too, because we're following another lonely young woman who is suffering mental health issues and is very gross and gruesome and disgusting and kind of living in filth with her alcoholic father. And I think that this book is also darkly satirical and humorous in the ways that those other books were. And because it's Ottessa Moshfegh, of course, I have to bring up My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which, if you liked this book, you have to pick up this book, because they're both about these lonely, gross women, except in My Year of Rest and Relaxation, we are in the early 2000s, and in this book, we are in the perspective of Eileen, our main character, and kind of her unreliable narrator perspective, looking back on her own young womanhood in the 60s. So it's a different setting, but pretty similar character, I think. They're both very jaded and selfish and rude and just kind of destructive people. And I think that if you enjoyed Ottessa Moshfegh's writing here, you should definitely check out this book. I also think that if you liked Ottessa Moshfegh's My Year of Rest and Relaxation, you should also check out The New Me by Hal Butler, because The New Me has a similar vibe of our young millennial woman in a job she just like cannot stand, in a life she can't stand, feeling like she's not getting anywhere, and she just wants to change herself so bad. And it's about the mundanity of her life and how she perceives herself and how she thinks others perceive her, and the mundanity of like office life. And in The New Me by Hal Butler, our main character is a temp, and she is going into like her office, and she's like thinking, okay, I'm gonna be better now, like things are gonna be better now, but are they really? Because can things really be better when you're in a tight economic spot, when life and friends and relating to other people is so tough, and trying to maintain those relationships? I think that that is one of the biggest similarities between this book and The New Me. And I think that if you enjoyed this one, you should check out The New Me. And if you enjoyed The New Me, you should check out My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Along this chain of recommendations, I also think that if you liked The New Me, you should check out Vacuum in the Dark by Jen Beagle, because this book is also following a young millennial woman who is kind of also in a rut in her life, but not as much. She's living a bit of a happier life, I think. She is a cleaner lady in LA, which is another, I think, similarity to Pizza Girl. Do you see what I mean by like this is kind of a grouping of recommendations? Anyways, so she is a cleaning lady in LA, and she basically gets these new clients, and she's developing a really weird relationship with all of these different clients. Each of these different clients are very different and very bizarre people, basically, and we're following her perspective as she gets in and out of relationships, as she experiences these just very bizarre interactions, and her past intermingling with her present. I think that this book is brilliant, funny, and just really beautiful portrayal of being just a young woman and like single and hanging out in a city. I think a lot of these books are very much that. I mean, within this cluster of books I'm recommending, those are those recommendations about like the vibe of young millennial woman who is really bleak and lives in a world that is kind of bleak and in a situation that is also kind of sucky. But we see as she deals with it, and it's kind of fun, I guess. So yeah, those are that genre of book recommendations. The next duo I have here is Catherine House and Vida Nostra. I think that both of these books are dark academia books with a twist, with something kind of unsettling and magical going on, and main character who is kind of passive in her own life, but who still has to maneuver her way around this sort of setting. This book is about a girl who goes on holiday with her mom, and I think this is a Ukrainian book, and it was translated and published in the US like a few years back. And this book was a new release in like 2020 or 2019, and everyone's been talking about whether they hate it or love it, whether they're disappointed in it or not. And I think that if you weren't disappointed in this book, you did enjoy it, you should check this book out, or, vice versa. Because, again, it's dealing with kind of similar vibes, but I've also heard from some people that, like, reading this before reading this kind of, like ruined it for them, like that idea that, getting the same vibe from one book and then reading another book with a similar sort of energies, then like you can't fully enjoy it. So maybe that's the case for you, but hopefully this duo recommendation goes well for you, because I enjoyed both these books a lot. I think I rated them both 4 stars, and I think that almost creepy, but not really, more unsettling and unknowable energy of these 2 books is really what made them compelling for me. The next book recommendation duo I have here is Real Life by Brandon Taylor and Transcendent Kingdom by Yajiasi. They're both following a Black main character who is in a graduate program. However, they deal with a lot of different topics in different ways. Our main character in this book is dealing with grief, but that's kind of in the background of the story. And in Transcendent Kingdom, our main character is dealing with grief a lot because she lost her brother due to opioid addiction when she was younger. And so now she is doing research studying addiction, even though it's not like a direct link, like she doesn't study it because of that. It's just kind of what it happens to be. And in Transcendent Kingdom, our main character talks about the racism she's faced in like rural Alabama, I believe, or Georgia, experiences she had growing up as an immigrant and always in the shadow of her basketball star older brother and her complicated relationship with her mother. And I think in this book, we are exploring more so our main character's complicated relationship with his peers and his classmates and the racism and microaggressions that go on there. And we're also seeing how he is dealing with the grief of the passing of his father. And actually both of the main characters in Real Life and Transcendent Kingdom are queer characters. And in this book, it's explored more in depth because he gets into a relationship with one of the other graduate students. And both of these books are about these detached young people who are very emotionally removed from their own lives almost due to their circumstances, and it's very sad and melancholy, but also very thought-provoking, the sort of experiences they discuss and the thoughts that our characters have and the reflections they have on their realities and their existence. And I think both of these books are these like slow character studies that are very, very gripping and fascinating. So if you liked one, check out the other. The next book duo I have here is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon and The First Sister by Lyndon A. Lewis. These 2 books are both space operas. They're both queer space operas, and they're both about rebellion. In An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon, we are following an autistic main character who is kind of an agender or gender non-conforming girl, and her mother died when she was very young on the spaceship, which is set up like a very literal caste system from the darkest to the lightest, from the most exploited to the exploiters, and we are following sort of the civil war that occurs when our main character basically incites a rebellion in trying to figure out the realities of her situation through these letters and messages that her mother kind of left her, she supposes, as she was dying, trying to give birth to our main character. And in The First Sister, we are following this nun who cannot speak because none of the nuns on the spaceship are allowed to speak because they exist solely to basically sexually serve and submit and please the soldiers on the ship. And we are following the new captain of the ship, who is a woman, and she is like super buff, and she's about to like take charge of things and shift everything around. And so our main character, or one of our main characters, this nun, is attempting to become the first sister, the top ranking nun, and to get close to our new ship captain. And we're also following this soldier who is trying to find his lost love, a non-binary character who defected from the space military, and now he is trying to find his lover / friend. So these books are obviously both these space sagas, but they're really deeply rooted in love and relationships and queer relationships and the connections that people have with each other in the midst of like chaos and rebellion. And I think both of these books are absolutely brilliant, and you should definitely pick them up. And if you liked one of them, read the other. The next few duos I have here are all young adult contemporaries, so it's a bit lighter in terms of mood, because I know a lot of these have been super dark and heavy so far. But this duo is Full Disclosure by Cameron Garrett and We Regret to Inform You by Ariel Kaplan. In Full Disclosure, we are following an HIV positive teenage girl who has moved to a new school in New York City, and she's directing the school musical of Rent. And she's not out to anyone as HIV positive at the beginning of the book. And basically someone is trying to blackmail her into not dating this boy that she really likes, and things unfurl from there. Even though this premise may sound kind of scary, it's kind of reminds me of like Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda by Becky Albertalli, in the sense that the main conflict of the book is this blackmail, but like it's not as dark as it may seem at first. Like, it creates more interpersonal drama than anything else, and it is just like a solid YA queer contemporary with a big diverse cast of characters. And for We Regret to Inform You, we are following this this high school senior who is applying to colleges, and she is like a straight A student, like top of the class, in charge of a bunch of different clubs. Like, she's been working really hard in high school to get into a top school, but she gets a bunch of rejection letters in the mail from different colleges. And she's like, something is going on here. Something at her private school, at her college application process is not correct. And she's trying to figure out what's going on and to get to the bottom of it. Both of these YA contemporaries are about girls in high school who are ultimately trying to just like live their lives to the fullest without being hindered by the systems and people and prejudices that society has out for them. And I think that they're both very solid YA contemporary reads. My final book duo recommendation I have for you is, if you liked Foolish Hearts by Emma Mills, you should definitely check out The Last True Poets of the Sea by Julia Drake. Both of these books are following these girls who have queer girls around them, or who are queer girls, and the kind of interpersonal conflict that happens with a background setting of a really vibrant sort of like cast and just background, while exploring mental health issues and perception of yourself and other people in high school and just being a teenage girl. Because in The Last True Poets of the Sea, we are following our main character as she gets sent to live with her uncle in Maine for the summer, and she is bisexual, and she is still reeling from the attempted suicide of her younger brother, and she is also dealing with a lot of sort of issues with herself, but now she's working at this like aquarium. And in Foolish Hearts, we're following a teenage girl main character who is in a Shakespeare production, forcibly assigned to this girl who is known to be super prickly and kind of rude and mean. And she's extra mean lately because she just broke up with her girlfriend of like a long-term situation at this private kind of bougie high school. Our main character isn't like a bougie girl, like she is like with a scholarship student there, and so she is kind of just figuring out like this new relationship with this girl and the drama that has come from this breakup and the fallout of this. I just think both of these books are these really compelling stories about teenage girls and the problems they have, which are like very real, and the interests and the obsessions and the love that they have for things, which is also so real and so important. Because in Foolish Hearts by Emma Mills, our main character kind of gets into a K-pop band, or not a K-pop band, it's like a boy band almost, and she kind of like geeks out over it. And I feel like, I don't know, it's just really sweet and wholesome, and seeing all these different characters interact with each other and these relationships play out in a really spectacular way was just, it was so beautiful to me, and I loved it a lot. Those are all of my book duo or grouping recommendations. I hope that if you do take any of these recommendations based off of any of these books that you have read before, you enjoy them. Let me know if you've read any of these books in the comments down below, and I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stupid bullshit. Bye.